Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. I will start with a presentation by a short story. OK, so far so good. Great. Once upon a time, a developer named George was in charge of coding, developing, designing a platform, helping developers thriving on their daily basis with their code. And once he came across his manager asking him to welcome, onboard, and mentor young developers. The main issue was he had done that earlier. So here came the D-Day. He welcomed all the youngsters, setting up the different tools such as IntelliJ IDE, such as Git, introduced them on all the different standards and the different documentation. And after a while, he asked them to either work on some bug fixes or new functionalities. So, in your opinion, was it a success or a failure? A success, for instance, would be there was just few one-tweets, a few question answers, but everything was hunky-dory and was as expected. On the other way around, a failure would be, for instance, it was completely different from what George expected in terms of quality. So raise the hand if you think it was a success, please. OK. Raise the hand if you think it was a failure. OK, and I would say it's normal. Why? Because when you learn code at school, it's completely different from what we can expect as a code running into production. By the way, it was the head of George when he first read the merge requests. To sum up, the code was not clear enough. You know, the way we write the code only once, and it was with plenty of time, we don't use that. We not use that at school. The logs were not efficient, such as choosing the right level of logs. We not used to that at school, too. I don't talk about the error management of the test. To be crystal clear, it was not production ready. So after this long introduction, let me introduce myself. I'm Alexandre Touret. I'm a software architect, and you probably recognize my strong French accent. And yes, I'm French. Now, let's get the ball rolling. And what would be for you, like George, if you are about to onboard young developers? The first difficulty to tackle is about the IT crowd, because the IT goes beyond just developer, there's SRE, there are DevOps, and such like. And the IT crowd keeps renewing all the time. Every year you will get newcomers in our industry and in your company. So it is very important to formalize everything, to make everything explicit, not implicit, and never stop evangelizing the basics, such as how to write logs. What are the good practices in that? Error management, test, and such like. Another difficulty to tackle is about the transition phase. Everybody needs a transition phase. Even though you are a seasoned developer, you will need a short transition phase when you first join a company. So think about the young developers, or they should be. The main difficulty during that is depending of your project, depending of your organization, depending of your character, the character of the newcomers. And the transition phase will be short or long. I would say it depends. And the main fact about that is the first few weeks are really important. They clearly have an impact on the quality of the whole onboarding, for good or for bad. To help you in such a challenge, you will have to develop some soft skills. And among other things, one of the main soft skills to develop is your attitude. By the way, it's really difficult to get the right posture while being yourself. Depending of your character, whether you are too shy, too introverted, or the opposite, getting the good posture and a good balance between being too friendly or too harsh could be really tricky. So, by the way, I strongly advise against the attitude of the sergeant in full metal jacket. It won't work at all. But you must be aware, you won't be the buddy in the team. You won't be a regular colleague. You will be the referent. You must provide trust and confidence. You won't be a friend. Why? Because you must provide a safe place when the young developers could ask freely for help, when they are completely stuck, when they want to get a feedback from you. And we will look into that afterwards. Now, another soft skill to develop is about empathy. Remember when you just left school to get into an IT company, you discovered a new world. The IT company is completely different from what is at engineering school or in university. So it will be the same for them. You must have that in mind. And last difficulty, but not the least, is about the time management. Most of the time when you onboard, when you mentor young developers, you do that on top of your daily job. The easiest solution, I would say the only solution I found, is to add time blockers in my agenda to help the young developers avoid being stuck for more than half a day. So every day, I schedule for the next 3-4 months a 30-minute meeting with them to have a free chat, to help them if they are stuck and whatever. Besides, you can also schedule a pair programming session on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis. It depends on your work. It depends on the context. We will see that. We will see the importance of the pair programming afterwards. Then. Now, how to learn to code. Most of the time, you will onboard people who have learned code at school through a theoretical way. It's really important to have the hands-on, to clearly work on real-life project. If you can avoid short deadlines, could be great, by the way, but it's really important to have the hands-on, to see how it's important to code, and then clearly see the impact of the code. But it's really important to provide, to assign short, mid-term objectives to let the young developers be fully involved in your project. For instance, when I led a team with young developers, I assigned to her several tasks with a common thread, which was basically providing a set of tools for Keycloak Red Hat SSO, where she could write SQL scripts, she could write scripts, she could write web interfaces, and Java programs, whatever. But she was fully involved in this project for 1 year, 2 years. Digging into the code doesn't mean that you avoid digging into theory. It's really important to have that in mind. And looking to the theory could be more valuable in this way. Why? Because a young developer could clearly see the impact directly in the wild coding. So when you propose looking into the theory, you can propose first the official documentation of your project, or the project of a framework, but you can also propose some books. I know clean code nowadays seems controversial and underrated, but frankly, for young developers, know how to name a variable, know how to write a method, and how to write efficient tests is still worthy. To make it less boring, I drafted 2 workshops. The first one, both are on my GitHub, but the first one is a bit old now. You can check out the latest. I drafted with a colleague of mine, Wordline. Both are free to use, so feel free to use them. If you want to raise issue, it would be strongly appreciated. That leads us to the workshop. When you onboard young developers, you need a toolbox. Among these tools, workshops are really one of the most interesting tools. Why? Because once you have drafted the workshop, you can propose it several times on different onboardings. So feel free to propose to create workshops. If you want to get a better return of investment, you can also address this workshop, work on this workshop through pair programming session with a seasoned developer. Why? Because you will have a direct impact while coding, and you can propose smarter solutions. For instance, most of the time, when you have young developers who has to calculate the average of a list, most of the time, he will do the solution on the left. But as a seasoned developer, you can propose a smarter way using streams, for instance, or Lambda. It's just an example how it's important to have in-person interactions with the young developers. Most of the time, I would say not most of the time, every time, humans learn observing and imitating. developers are not an exception. So the way you work, the way you code, the way you analyze issues, the way you pinpoint what is the root cause are really important, because the young developers will first observe you, analyze what you did, and then try to imitate you afterwards. It's really important to have that in mind. And beyond just in-person interaction, beyond your daily work, it's really important to over-communicate if you work remotely through different tools such as Teams, such as GitLab. For instance, if you comment the code made by young developers, don't hesitate to add more comments, to add links to videos, to add links to existing documentation in your comments. It will be strongly valuable for them. Last point is about the tech watch. Know how to be on track is primordial nowadays. It's really important to have that in mind. And I see many developers, even if they have 2 years of experience, we don't do the tech watch on a regular basis. So it's really important to let the young developers embracing that. So give the opportunity, and you can also add some advices. Such, for instance, if you have a young developers who work on Keycloak, Red Hat SSO, you can say, okay, you are currently working on Keycloak. Here is a video of Hard V2 about Hard V2 or about OpenID Connect, for instance. Now, if like George, you are about to onboard young developers in the coming weeks, what to do, what to prepare before. The first thing to have in mind is to prepare it earlier. Make an integration onboarding path. I don't mean create a 12-page document with plenty of paragraphs and diagrams and processes, whatever. No, just create a checklist. Could be really great for you. Document everything. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, make everything explicit, not implicit. For instance, if you have strong expectation on a merge request, feel free to create the documentation I've done as a template for every merge request with a checklist to all the stuff to do. Now, it's really important also to have in mind you should, I would say, have an inventory of the skills. What are the required skills for your project? Should you know Java? At which level of proficiency? Should you know Docker? Should you know SQL? Whatever. But feel free to assess all of these skills on a regular basis with the developers. Could be really important. Why? Because you get valuable feedbacks from them, and you can then adapt the pair programming session or the different workshops of their learning paths. To help you, you can, for instance, track the progression. Here is an example when I tracked the progression of a trainee. And in France, we have, I don't know how to say that in English, long-time trainee during 3 years. I had in my company a trainee during 3 weeks with a pace of 3 weeks at the company, 3 weeks at the university. So we tracked on a regular basis, it was on a quarter basis, their skills and her skills learned either at the university or at Worldline. And it was a bit more challenging with the skills learned at Worldline, in my company, by the way. Now, how to assign tasks? Good question, isn't it? First, when you track the progression, you will help the young developers. How? Because most of the time, your progression, either in sport, either in music, isn't linear at all. There are always some steps when you can struggle with some difficulties, when you can feel completely stuck. And having such a progression could help you and help the young developer take a breath, step back, see what he or she has done so far, and keep motivated. And now, if you want to assign some tasks, I would recommend starting with the easiest task possible. Why? Because it would make a success. And with this first success, it will make the young developers more confident, and he or she will tackle the other difficulties afterwards. And then don't hesitate to increase the complexity step by step. And at the other way around, if potentially she or she is completely stuck with one stuff, you can freely have a chat because you developed some soft skills before. and say, okay, we clearly see that you are completely stuck. Now I will take you back on your comfort zone, work with you through workshops, through pair programming sessions to get rid of this difficulty, and we take you back afterwards. Now, which path could we expect? Most of the time, I would say it depends. It depends of the skills, it depends of the context, it depends of the company, of the involvement if you have a trainee. But we can expect that a developer could have learned the tools, the practices, and looked around the company, the team, I would say culture, by 1 week, I would say. At the end of the first week, and at the end of the first month, the young developer could start code with a strong support. And at the end of the first quarter, could start to work with other colleagues, which is really important to discover a new way of thinking, and start being autonomous. So, at Boardline, just a short feedback, we have different global, local initiatives. And what are my difficulties? What have been my difficulties so far? The time management is the strongest difficulty, the trickiest, because as I said, most of the time you do that in addition of your daily job, so it's very complicated to tackle it. Covering all the needs for your project could be also difficult, because when you onboard people coming from school and you have a bunch of technologies in your project, it's really difficult to cover all the needs for your team. And the remote office, work from home. It's, as I said before, in-person interaction are really important. And how I tackled this issue, I changed my schedule of work from home to have at least 1 day or 2 days a week in-person interaction at the office with the young developers, especially at the beginning. Why? Because most of the time when you onboard young developers coming for school, they are not ready for, it's just my opinion, they are not ready for full remote experience. Maybe afterwards, but at the beginning, no, I don't think so. So, if like George, you want to make your next onboarding a success, what would be the main takeaways of his presentation? First of all, prepare everything. And don't hesitate to share it with your other colleagues. Address all the different tasks, step by step, and increase the complexity also, step by step. Try to keep a dedicated time for your young developers. It's really important. Communicate also on a regular basis with them. It's also really important. And don't hesitate, if you are in remote, to over-communicate with them. And track the progression. It could be really important to keep the motivation. And beyond all of these items, one of the most important thing would be to involve them in your project. Because, as Benjamin Franklin said, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free. What? Okay.
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you for the talk. And yeah, I have one question regarding the young developers, because I see that these new generations comes with a different pace. And I don't know if you understand. So I have the doubt that this model or these tips that you just explained applies also for these young developers. Maybe they get frustrated because they don't have hands-on very fast, or I don't know if you dealt sometimes with this kind of young developers.
Yeah, I usually have trainees in my company. And yeah, it's a challenge because it's different culture, different way of thinking, the way of ways of thinking, and you have to adapt yourself. Hopefully, I'm also a supply teacher at the university, so I'm a bit prepared for that.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you very much.
I also have a question because I feel the young generation and the new developers, they have cheat codes in terms of AI.
Yeah.
And they go faster in some ways, and they're like to adopt the way the company is doing it, the way you're coding stuff, the way to document it. Do you have specific training about this? Do you tell them to not use any of those things when they get started?
Yeah, because we use GitHub Copilot within a company, and I didn't talk about that because I think that AI is in addition to what you do, in addition to the workshops, your attitude and so on. It's not the most important thing in my opinion. And you have to learn them how to use it. It's important because it's like for the oldest in this room, picking up a code from Stack Overflow. You have to criticize what the LLM did, what the LLM returned as a solution. And I also see that at the university. When for instance, I have a workshop on SQL and databases, and I see all the young the student asking to ChatGPT today, okay, find me the solution. But the only advice I give them is, okay, try to understand why he said that. But we have, in my opinion, we have a responsibility for that. It's an accelerator, but it's a tool, but we need to know how to use it. Did I answer to your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I guess that's part of the training that you give them and part of the knowledge you give them as a senior developer. Is like.
Yeah, but it's the same thing when a dozen of years ago when I had to I picked up code from Stack Overflow from Google. It was the same thing, in my opinion. It's faster, it's stronger, it's better, but we need to, how can I say, we need to be smart on that and to check it before we're using it in our code and in our job, by the way. Yeah.
Thanks for the talk. What would you say is the main difference between onboarding a young developer and a non-young developer?
I had this discussion with a friend of mine before. Usually, the non-young developers, for instance, who shift from another job, for instance, you mean? Okay. Most of the time, they are more motivated. And they're used to digging into the documentation and to understand why they should use this framework instead of this one and understand the solution. But I don't say that there's a rule of thumb that, okay, all the young developers are stupid and only pick up code from from ChatGPT. No, not at all. But most of the time, the young developers are more motivated to understand what is under the hood and how it works. Another question? So thank you very much. If you want to have a chat with me, feel free.